Back to another episode of the Self-Development with Tactics podcast. Or just me. I would actually have to kind of change the name. Anyway, once again, something by Andrew Huberman. Actually, why? Why am I often talking about him? Why am I featuring often what he's saying, what he's talking about, kind of at this point of time at least? First of all, I think it is personal interest. And second of all, there's not first of all, and second of all, personal interest, definitely. And also because I think that the things that he is talking about and the way that he is talking about those things, which is very engaging, I think, and also very, very useful in the sense of it's not boring. I have a feeling that it is really not boring when he is talking about something, even if it is very scientific. I don't really think that it is boring then. And listening to him on the podcast, by the way, there is a podcast by Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast, definitely worth checking out and also definitely worth listening to. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And also just not one-sided, very scientific, I would say, like, balancing things out and having the pros and the cons and whatnot. I just really like the style that he's using to bring across the information and, well, basically teach the information. Today, this is a live session from Seattle, Washington, which is quite cool, having some Q&A type stuff by him, since I think questions that other people are often questions that other people ask, might be some questions that you're having as well, or that I am having as well. So it might be the case that I'm going to skip a few things that I'm not quite interested in, or I don't think is maybe, let's say necessary. But yeah, I'm going to show you the name. I think it was published 4 months ago. So 2022. It is called Live Event Q&A, Dr. Andrew Huberman Question and Answer in Seattle, Washington. I don't know the exact date, but this is the source that I'm using today. And mainly, or just, how do you say it? It's just a source. Nothing more, nothing less. Something that I am quite aware of, and I also want to make you quite aware of, is that I am not re-uploading quite the whole entire thing. I'm just using it as a base for me to talk about other things and to, maybe also add certain things that he has said or other people have said before, period. I'm not re-uploading it since I think that this would be, really, it's not a mean thing. It is a really fucked up thing because he's putting in such a lot of work and he is putting himself in such a, maybe even dangerous situation since, with you as a professor, which is your job, are also public in this sense, having a podcast, being on social media, being live, being on television and whatnot, this might also have some drawbacks when it comes to your job as a scientist and or as a professor. So he's definitely putting himself out there and trying to make great change. But of course, there's still a risk. This is something that I just want to point out.
What is your most used protocol? I'm assuming that you mean the protocol that I use the most. I genuinely do the morning sunlight viewing. This evening, I went and looked at the sunset every single evening, and I absolutely do 10 to 30 minutes of some non-sleep deep rest protocol every single day. The reason I called it non-sleep deep rest is because while I love the classic traditions of and things like yoga nidra, my fear was that if I called things yoga nidra, that people would get spooked. But I also have to say that I rather loathe the fact that scientists use so many fancy terms.
And there you can just see, not using a certain word, deciding not to use a certain word or phrase and whatever, it is not about him, making a lot of money with it. No, it is about the end consumer. It is about the person. He is willing to provide information, to provide amazing information for people, but also so that they actually use it and do this and at least, maybe try it out. And I think as well, when it is called yoga nidra, I also thought, well, this is again some woo-woo shit. I'm not gonna, participate in it. I'm not gonna try it out and whatnot. But when it is NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, this sounds very scientific. This sounds very cool. So I'm gonna try it out. Definitely something to mention. Definitely something to
that it also
keep in
vaults
mind.
Information from the very people that fund the work. So I have a kind of an axe to grind with the scientific community too. So non-sleep deep rest was my attempt to kind of put my arms around a number of different things like yoga nidra, which I have great reverence for, and other tools like that. I do that usually in the early afternoon, or if I wake up first thing in the morning and I haven't slept enough or not that well, I'll do 30 minutes of yoga nidra, and I feel terrific after that. I'll just mention a brief anecdote. I learned about yoga nidra while researching a book that I never wrote, that may or may not ever be published. I went and spent a week in a trauma center and addiction treatment center in Florida and saw some amazing work of some amazing people and some amazing transformations. And it was a big part of their daily routine for these people to do yoga nidra and non-sleep deep rest. And I thought they're really onto something here. So almost religiously for me, every day, 10 to 30 minutes. Not that it matters, but the CEO of Google's really into NSDR. I don't know him, but he's written about that a number of times. In Seattle, sunrise varies from 4:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. depending on season. Are you recommending to vary your wake up outside time with the seasons? Somewhat. You don't need to see the sun cross the horizon. That would be great, but not everyone can wake up with the sun. You want to get...
An interesting anecdote maybe. Apparently, partly a reason why we see color is so that we can see time, or so that we can figure out the time. So when the sun goes down and when the sun rises, there is a orangish, yellowish, maybe sometimes even reddish, purplish color in the sky. And because of that, we can figure out what time it is. Also something, by the way, Andrew Huberman once in a podcast said along the lines. Take it with a grain of salt, maybe check out or search for it yourself. But something along the lines of this, which would just really make sense.
So-called low solar angle sunlight. Why? Because of that yellow-blue contrast that we talked about before. Many people wake up before the sun is out. If you want to be awake, turn on as many bright lights as you can. Up here, I don't know, does anyone here, you don't have to admit this if you don't want to, but maybe nod or raise your hand if you're comfortable admitting that in the winter you feel less well, or typically in the transition. Yeah, it's huge up here. It's amazing. And then when you're on campus, or that's where I've spent time, and you see Rainier and it's like the blossoms are out and you feel almost high, because that's dopamine. Animals that have white pelage in the winter and then it turns dark in the summer and spring months, that pathway, the melanin pathway, is from tyrosine, which is the precursor to dopamine and also to melanin production in the fur. So the whole system is linked. It's not rigged, it's linked. So what do I suggest? I suggest in the winter months, getting 30 minutes of sunlight viewing. I know it's a lot, but it's much better than feeling lousy all day. And then the real key in the winter is to try and catch some sunlight before it goes down. If you're indoors and it goes down and then you go outside and it's dark, your brain and body don't really know where they are in time. And then you flip on Ozark and you're watching Ozark, and then you really don't know where you are in time. I have one more episode, don't tell me what happened. That show is... When I was a postdoc, I used to recommend The Wire to my competitors. True. I go to sleep fired up, ready and excited to do whatever it takes. When I wake up, that drive is depleted. Why and what can I do? Interesting. Have not heard that one before, but if I were to venture a guess, we didn't spend much time tonight talking about the autonomic nervous system, this kind of seesaw that takes us from very alert, potentially panicked, but to very, very deep sleep. Even, God forbid, we go into a coma, it's because the parasympathetic nervous system is overactive relative to the sympathetic nervous system, the seesaw of autonomic function. You may be sleeping very, very deeply, and when you are in deep, deep rest, the last thing you want to do is get into that forward center of mass, thinking, planning, predicting, right?
Since yesterday, there was also a question, theoretically a question around books by Tim Ferriss on the Tim Ferriss Show, interviewing Andrew Huberman, talking about many interesting things. You might check out the episode. It's also available as a podcast by Tim Ferriss and also by myself, if you want to have it a bit compromised, or just basically some snippets out of it that I have chosen. The books, he might be talking about poetry there, which I found really interesting. May also not be the case, maybe about neuroscience.
What are some of your favorite books that have had the biggest impact on you? Kyle G. Thank you, Kyle. So many. For nonfiction, Well, Oliver Sacks's autobiography On the Move had a profound impact on me. You know, people hated him. The scientific community tried to kick him out. They said horrible things about him, created all sorts of scandals. It wasn't until Awakenings became a blockbuster movie that suddenly he got appointments at NYU and Columbia. Then now they wanted him back. And the revered neurologist, like incredible, right? But he was also a real seeker and the cuttlefish thing, and he had a lot of internal struggles too, some of which I relate to, some of which I don't. I actually been in touch with his former partner because I actually moved to Topanga Canyon for a short while just because Oliver lived there. I thought if I go there, I'll actually finish this book. Guess what? Just moving someplace doesn't allow you to finish a book. He lived.
But sometimes it may actually really help. There are many people that, for example, decide to write and or work in a coffee shop just because they like the atmosphere, they like, maybe the endless amount of coffees they can get and whatever. So maybe indeed changing your place, if you can, of course, might actually enable you to work better, more efficient, and maybe even enjoy the work a bit more. Something that I have realized over the years maybe is working and sleeping in the same room might not be that beneficial. Since there might be a cue, okay, when I am in this room, it is about work or food or whatever, but not necessarily about sleep. It should be probably, if you can, it should be a different room. I've read it in several books, maybe one book, I don't know, might have been in Atomic Habits, might be the case. I'm not quite sure, since also, certain people tend to smoke in certain environments and or in, certain spots. There was, I don't know why I remember this, but I think there was an example around horse riding by James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, where it basically was about, when this person is about to ride the horse, like in this area and whatnot, this person is smoking just because there is some sort of a cue and then whatever. And maybe also in terms of those people that this person meets there and, maybe trying to be in a different place, maybe just, facing a different direction and not just doing things the complete same way might also do the trick, or might at least really help with addiction, I don't know, but maybe also, but habits definitely. So I can't do that. I can't do the having my workplace in a different space than I'm having my bed. There is my bed. it's not that easy. And as I said before, it may not be applicable since you may not have the resources, as I am not having the resources. But yeah.
Lived in Topanga, so I was like, that's the key. It didn't work. And people were wondering why I was hanging around their house all the time, because it was Oliver's former home. So that's an amazing book. And tells you my obsessive nature. The other books that have had a profound influence on me, I would say in the nonfiction realm, I learned how to make a decent steak and a few other simple recipes not well from Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Chef, because I really needed help. That was a fun one.
Which primarily, though, is a book about learning, as far as I remember and as far as I know. Basically concepts, meta-learning, the skill of learning, the skill of learning, basically, so meta-learning. But apparently also some recipes.
Robert Greene's book, Mastery, because I've had amazing mentors, and that book is all about finding mentors and assigning mentors to you, even if you don't know them. And as you can tell from my stories about Oliver, who I never met, and a few other folks that I've just decided that they don't know it, but I'm mentoring them. They're mentoring me, excuse me. That book was really important for me. And that mentor-mentee relationships always involve a breakup, either by death or by decision or by consequence, your circumstance rather. There's something happens and they're supposed to break. You're not supposed to apprentice with somebody forever. That was an interesting book for me. I would say in the fiction realm, it's all childhood books because it's been a long time since I've read fiction. I read a lot of poetry. I'm a big Wendell Berry fan. I like poetry because poetry to me is like the subconscious. The structure is all messed up and you think you understand what they're talking about, but you don't really know. And so it always feels important and consequential, even though, it's your own interpretation. And then I love the psychologists. I love Jung. I love Erickson. I love the psychologists and could read endlessly about the early days of attachment theory and things like that, because I find that stuff to be fascinating. So those books have been a lot of fun, and I love picture books with animals. Do you have any tips on how?
He also mentioned when it comes to poetry, it might be beneficial to listen to certain people, even though he also mentioned he is not suggesting people to be in front of screens even more than we already are. But still, maybe listening to things, listening to, maybe the author. Often I think it's not even the author that is reading the book or doing the audiobook, but it may be beneficial also when it comes to understanding and, having the right rhythm, poetry. And, Do you have any tips on how to improve memory by Ron Vered?
How to improve memory. Yes, Ron Vered. Yes, okay, this is a wild literature and I love it, and it's changing the way that I do things. I thought that to remember things, you're supposed to get really, really excited, really focused, and remember them. And guess what? That's not how you do it. There are data and there are stories going back to medieval times that they used to teach kids things and then throw them in the river. There's a beautiful annual review of neuroscience written by the late James McGaw, a brilliant researcher who taught me that in this review. And it turns out that if you want to remember something, you want to spike adrenaline after you acquired that information. After. That means the double espresso and the ice bath after you study for math. Immediately after. And you think about this, that makes perfect sense, right? Think about the one trial learning that nobody wants to experience, which is a car accident or some traumatic thing. You didn't get the spike of adrenaline first, you got the spike of adrenaline after. So again, I discourage the use of excessive stimulants or, anything like that. But if you're going to try and remember information, you need to get your brain and body into a high autonomic arousal state. Literally, you need to deploy adrenaline into your system after you have made the attempt to learn some information. So much so that if you give people a beta blocker after learning emotional information, they don't learn it as well. Incredible. Just incredible data in animals and humans. This is the beautiful work of Larry Cahill at UC Irvine and James McGaw. So that's how I would focus on remembering things better. And it's also true that if you tell yourself that something's really important to you, you'll be able to learn it better. If you meet people and they tell you their name and you forget 2 seconds later, well, you should probably be thinking, and now I do this, I meet people and I think, okay, what terrible thing did this person do? Just try and spike my adrenaline or something like that. It's a terrible trick, but I haven't figured out a better way. But that's actually one data-supported way to do that. Easily a dozen or more studies in humans on that very topic. How do you manage social media addiction, Paul?
Remembering things. He also, there are very recent episodes around focus. There he does say that, for example, caffeine, which dilates, that I found pretty interesting, dilates the pupils, which makes one more focused. Apparently, having very, very small pupils adds peripheral vision, quote unquote adds. But when they're dilated, you apparently are more focused, if I remember that correctly, of course. But still, of course, when you're having more focus, it's better for learning because you're more focused. Since I think he hasn't mentioned it yet, caffeine, ice bath, probably the best way is having your hands in ice. And therefore, or in this way, spiking your adrenaline. Something maybe not to do is heat. Apparently, with cold exposure, you're hitting the right spot way easier and then way more efficiently without having third-degree burns compared to having heat or applying heat or using heat to remember things easier. And of course, there are also great resources when it comes to, learning in and of itself. As I said before, Tim Ferriss with his book, The 4-Hour Chef, so meta-learning. There's also a ton of YouTube content, I think also by him maybe, or just, a quick Google search, you're gonna find, I think DISS, which is dissect, sequence, and the other S I don't know, and the I doesn't stand for anything. So basically kind of a rule, I think by him is material over method, but still, there are a tremendous amount of people that have won the Olympics, let's call them just Olympics, of remembering things using certain techniques like is it called the Loki method? or Mind Palace. If you're Googling for this, you're going to find it, which is quite interesting. Also, of course, spaced repetition learning, I guess. So therefore, basically flashcards and many more techniques. Those people that are able to, I don't know, memorize the number P to the 200th position or whatever, and many more things, many more data and whatever it might be about whatever they have to recall and memorize. They are pretty great techniques. Also, Josh Waitzkin and his books, I think The Art of Learning, Tim Ferriss must have, I guess, as far as I remember, interviewed him as well. So definitely also something to check out and keep in mind. But yeah, so there are actually quite a lot of resources on how to learn, or just learning more efficiently, learning better, and whatever.
Oi. Well, we should be careful with the use of the word addiction, because here I think it's entirely appropriate. When you're engaging in a behavior over and over and over again, and you're thinking to yourself, this isn't even that interesting, you're officially addicted. That's the litmus test for addiction, not this feels so good. People talk about the dopamine hits of social media. Those only come at the beginning. But then when you find yourself scrolling, like, what am I doing? Maybe it's that narrow visual aperture, you're a hypnotized chicken, but maybe also you are seeking more dopamine hits, because guess what? That dopamine wave pool is depleted, at least for that activity. It is true that dopamine, you have a baseline and then you have peaks on that ride on that baseline. I do think that we can have dopamine for one behavior and not for another, but it's a generalized phenomenon. So how do you manage it? You have to stop seeking within social media. And so I've taken on the practice of turning off my phone for a couple hours each day. It's incredibly hard. People get really upset too, by the way. In case you haven't noticed, these tethers that people expect. We recorded a podcast recently, and so I don't want to go into too much depth now about attachment and grief. And we all have a map. Now you understand what the maps are of space, time, and a dimension called closeness to everyone that we know. Space, where they are; time, when they are, dead, alive, when will I see them again, etc. And closeness. And the phone has allowed us to tap into space, time, and this closeness map, which define all our attachments on a very regular basis. So you can understand why it's so valuable to people. The plane lands and everyone's texting. The plane takes off, everyone's texting. It's like, where are you? Well, the plane's in the air. There's this thing called flight tracker. No one cares about that anymore. You want to hear from the person. So I do think that I used to do in every odd hour of the day, my phone was off, and like half the relationships in my life disappeared. They couldn't tolerate it. I loved it. I loved them too. So I would say take breaks, and I would say at least an hour. And if you find yourself excited to get back on the phone, that excitement, that is the dopamine system. So you can kind of learn where it is for you. But if you find yourself scrolling mindlessly and it's not doing anything for you, you're driving that wave pool down, 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 down. So hopefully that analogy will help. It's weird to call myself Dr. Huberman. In my business, if you refer to yourself in the third person, it means you're officially a narcissist. So I'm just going to start with, were you nervous tonight? If so, what did you do to prepare, Brianne? You saw my nervousness, didn't you? No, I asked myself that question.
There was something quite interesting that who said that? I think it was on a Tim Ferriss show episode featuring someone or it was Viktor Frankl. I don't remember. Anyway, the point was thinking like, okay, I should actually be more nervous. So when you are in a position or a situation where you should be nervous, being like, well, I should actually be even more nervous. This apparently does the trick and makes you less nervous for whatever reason, because it might be it is indeed something I often think about, philosophize around, being like, well, I should be this and that and the other thing, and then I am just, doing the opposite quite. Yeah, that's basically it. With nervousness, maybe also, I don't know, anxiety, social anxiety and whatever. I should even be more anxious right now than I am. This whole phenomenon of, okay, don't think about an iceberg, and you are thinking about an iceberg, like, is it reverse psychology? I don't know. Apparently it does something, but I'd have to look that up again to make sure also who that person was that said it, and so on and so forth.
I was excited, and I think I'm good at lying to myself and telling myself that autonomic arousal, that might be nervousness, is excitement. But in truth, I wasn't. I was and am really excited to tell you all these stories and about biology. I know this might sound like a little bit of a line, but I actually don't feel myself as a like a person when I do the podcast or I do this stuff. I took a walk before I got here, and I have to be careful. There are only two topics that make me cry. One is talking about my bulldog. The other is talking about my graduate advisor. So I have to be very careful. But I took a walk and I imagined that they were here. And I know, don't make me cry. Lex Friedman made me cry on a podcast, and it was really unfair. And he was like digging. And there are a few people in the audience that know Costello, and it's like, and I just kept thinking to myself before coming in here, like, I love them and miss them. And Costello would be entirely bored with this whole thing. So I distracted myself a bit, and not so nervous. I do get nervous about things, sure, I'm human. But when it comes to biology, I think I still feel like that little kid who just wants to tell you all the stuff, so, can't help it. Is learning from failure equal to learning from success? Is one more efficient than the other? Rachel, thanks for your question. Well, on a trial-by-trial basis.
In the end, it may also be about framing things and realizing that we're all human. Of course, obviously, some people are not. Maybe some people might be aliens. Some people might be robots, if you know whom I'm referring to. No. We are all human, and it is okay to be nervous. It is okay to also stutter then when you are on the stage and whatever. I don't know. I think it is also how you're handling it, or how one is handling it. Of course, when you're like, I don't know, when you're stuttering and you're like, okay, why am I stuttering? And you're saying it and whatever, it might kind of break the whole situation and whatever. Of course, I think it also heavily depends on how one is taking it, how one is dealing with it. And I don't know, if one is focusing on talking about things, and it really depends on the situation, depends on whether this is a fucking presentation you're having to do for school, or you are doing in school, or it is such a presentation or such a conference. I think it also depends. But if you're bringing information to the audience, to the people that you're talking to, that is valuable, I think you have done your job and you have done whatever. If they are listening and if they are absorbing and whatever is not in your hand, you can just do your best and do something. But that is quite it. Just, is it humiliating? We are all human, and we all know that we are all human, besides certain person or a certain people. But
we know that when you fail at an attempt, on the next attempt, your forebrain is in a position to engage better. And this makes total sense, right? You feel that frustration, and you want to get the next one right. Well, you're harboring, or I should say funneling, more neural resources. Your focus, that aperture, tightens. Now, you have to be mindful of that too, because when you have a failure and then you're going to hit the bullseye. I'm thinking about a dartboard because I'm terrible at darts. Sober, I'm terrible at darts. I don't even drink. So that next trial, part of the problem is that focus can narrow so much that you can start to lose access to information that might help you if you were just to relax a little bit and dilate that focus a little bit. But in general, on a trial-by-trial basis, focus is the cue that your nervous system is going to be positioned to learn better on the next trial. Now, in terms of life experiences, gosh, I wish for everyone fewer failures and more successes. But, failures keep you humble. And I've had a lot of them. I mean, if people ever wanted and they, I'd be happy to tell you about. I've made a ton of mistakes in life, a ton of mistakes. Some of those were mistakes of persistence, like dumb decisions. It's going to change, and it's clearly never going to change. And then some were failures of misjudgment about other people or situations. And a lot of them were just plain failures, like the experiment didn't work, or it just wasn't the right thing. And you trying to reframe those, I do think that we owe it to ourselves and to the people that we know to try and generate some wins here and there and try and help other people generate wins. In running a lab over the years, and I still do, you realize that you want your students to publish a paper and feel that success pretty early so that they can experience, A, how much work it is, so they pick problems wisely, but B, so they can feel that, like, oh, I can do this. And I think that this gets into the psychological as well. I think that, yes, failures help, but successes help. And there, I think, I function best in a team. And I think that for those of you that feel like you're fighting some challenge alone, I do think that there are great resources to be had in trying to access other people as sources of support. I think that that's a great tool. There's this whole scientific literature around social connection and how that can help us reframe motivation and goals. Anyway, maybe that's a topic to expand on another.
Just because I got reminded of it, since yes, success feels good and being able to build something feels good and achieving something feels good and whatever, Andrew has also before talked about those micro wins, throughout your day, basically teaching yourself and learning how to create basically dopamine yourself and not relying on those external things like marks, a person saying, oh, you have done great and whatever, but you yourself, building this pool of dopamine, this pool of well, maybe even confidence in yourself by actually, I think, seeing that you are doing certain things. And well, most people hopefully would probably do more, since there is agitation if we are not kind of achieving the things that we want to achieve or think we can't achieve. This is why there is agitation, so that we, sit up or stand up and to start moving forward, at least trying to start moving forward. What I want to say is, realizing and remembering that you have done things before, that you've achieved things before, and, those micro achievements throughout the day. Okay, I don't know, yes, I have brushed my teeth. Might be something for some people that are or have been in very tough situations that is a goal, that is like a big achievement. And this is fine, by the way, if this is the case. And many more things. I mean, there's hundreds of micro achievements that you can place throughout the day. And so if you get to this point, you kind of reward yourself with dopamine. You reward yourself with, feeling better about yourself, probably. Definitely something to, maybe look up, research, and keep in mind. There is theoretically one more thing that I would go through in this video, but I might keep it for the next time. So I wish you the best and hopefully see you soon. So bye-bye.